on your neck, and according to some Meforshim, already cutting your neck. Not just on your neck, but in your neck. Al tisyayish atzmecha min harachamim. Don't think that there's not a way out. Because as we said, they're always on the continuum of Bechira. No matter how far you go down, that your fate seems to be sealed, there's always that opening that Hashem can make for you, if you truly want it. Turns his face to the wall. It's one of the halachas that we learned, that you should daven, facing the wall, not with distractions in front of you. And he davens, and sure enough, the Navi, on his way out of the palace, says, oh, message! Like his phone went off. Lahavdil. You have mail, or whatever it is. And he says, you go back to Chizkiyahu and tell him he just got a dispensation of 15 extra years of life, because he changed his mind. Now, that's an example of two things. One, how Hashem is always open to you overriding whatever the system of judgment. Again, the hashgachat hamishpat, going by the book. This is what it says. Versus the hashgachas hayud. Hashem needed Menashe to come into the world. It was part of the progression of Klal Yisrael. It's what Hashem wanted to happen. The Beis HaMikdash had to be destroyed. We had to move on to the next level. It was time. And Menashe was part of that. So Hashem overrides the system and gets involved and tells Chizkiyahu, and he influences, he presses a button to influence events. So Hashem's finger, Kilu, Kavyochel, can come down and peek through the system and, move. Something like watching a big game of, toys, but then the guy over watching it can, move in to, move a piece on the chessboard, so that the next guy has a good move or whatever it is. He's going to come in and make that change. And that's Hashem's decision. That's Hashem's decision. So when we move into Parshas Bo, we are moving into the next level of Hashgacha Pratis. So we may have gone through Dam Tzvardeya, right? Dam Malchus. Tzvardeya Yesod, right? And by the way, you see, because where did the Tzvardeyas go?
Everywhere.
Into their
Into their goof.
Into their privates. Some say it rendered them unable to have children. And it certainly went into their bread, which is always a metaphor of your private relationship. It's a lechem asher ochel is a metaphor for your marriage, your intimate relationship.
The oven, that's the mashal?
I think the bread is the mashal, where you bake the bread. Because it says they go into the dough also. Mm-hmm. Meaning anything that you think is private, any area that has a form of tzniut is violated by them. And that's how bad it is. And by the way, we can understand that in our generation probably better than any generation. How in the most private places, choser tzniut can sneak its way in and disturb and destroy, intimacy. And then came kinim. So kinim represents what? Hod. Netzach Hod Yisod, right? Now, what does kinim have to do with Hod? Now, one thing you should realize, each one of the spheres also represents a person, a figure, an icon, an iconic tzaddik, a personality who embodied that for us as a way for us to understand it and process it and live it and aspire to it. So David HaMelech was Malchus. Yisod is Yosef HaTzadik, according to most, according to the Kabbalistic system. And above that is Hod. Who's Hod? Aaron HaKohen. Now, what's unique about Aaron HaKohen more than anything else? That's true. He's Ov Sham Bar Sham. But what do we associate Aaron with besides the Mishnah and Pirkei Avos? Talking about from the Torah itself. Begadim, Bigdei Kahuna. Okay, clothing of kavod and majesty and sanctity. What's the thing that gets into clothes, which is the worst degradation of clothes? Lice, right? Well, it gets into the hair also, right? But in the Gemara and the Mishnah, when they speak about delousing stuff, they're talking about delousing clothing very often. It got into the clothing. I don't know. I haven't had too much of that issue. I don't really have much hair anyway, so it's not really an issue. But my kids have, you did the lice out of the hair. But the hair is also the place where the tzitz of Kodesh Lashem is on the head of Aaron. And where the oil of sanctity that made him a Kodesh was poured on his head and all the way down to his beard. And that's the place where lice would affect someone, right? So it's the exact opposite. It's the ultimate in busha. It's not beged of kavod, it's the antithesis of kavod, right? And really, if you think about it, the lice is the lowliest creature, and it's a bloodsucker. It's really like, yuck. It's, like a little vampire in there. And lives off the dead cells. And what kavod really is, when somebody is honoring the self, they're not leeching off anybody. They're not eating dead cells. They're not tiny. They stand up and develop into who they are. And they stand up with pride. Not haughtiness, but with kavod. When you honor yourself, you don't allow lice to infest you. That's not b'chavadik. It's just not b'chavadik. You don't allow yourself to go unkempt and unclean. It's not kavod. Just like interesting, the Kohen was not how to get a haircut every 30 days, right? He's not allowed to work in the Beis Hamikdash with a big chup. And what they do with the teenage Kohanim was a problem. They weren't allowed. Again, because that's kavod. So each one of the makos rectified a failure, an issue that the Jews had fallen into. The pasuk says that Bnei Yisrael paru v'yishritzu v'yirbu, right? What's next? V'ya'atzmu b'm'od ma'od. Each of those levels was descending to a lower state. Paru v'ravu, we speak about human beings that way. Okay, so maybe they weren't acting like Jews, but they were acting like mensch, like a mensch, okay, a mensch, pru. But then what comes next? V'yishritzu. They went down to the level of Schwartzim, that they just were reproducing without any particular madrega of kedusha or tzniut or kavod or malchut. And then it got worse. Vayirbu. Vayirbu means riv, tension, fighting, machloket. So they lost that too. And then vayatzmu, it became part of their bones, in their bones. Right? B'm'od ma'od. And what's considered ma'od? The ma'od is the Yetzer Hara is called ma'od. Was tov ma'od. Rashi says ma'od is referring to the Yetzer Hara. They sunk all the way down into it. So we had to lift Klal Yisrael out by the midos. And as the Mitzri inside of them was purged. I heard a word for the name of Rabbi Moshe Gottesman from Hank, who was a member of my shul when I was Rav at Youngers of Oceanside, famous for what he used to tell, Stark. He says, Vayifen cho v'cho vayachas ha-Mitzri. Moshe looked this way and that way and hit the Mitzri. He says, what does that mean? Moshe said, I'm a contradiction. I grew up in the house of Paro. I'm half Egyptian. I went, they looked, I see myself as Egyptian. At the same time, these are my brothers. He said, I can't live like this. Vayifen cho v'cho. He looked at his inner contradiction, and he said, Vayachas ha-Mitzri, the Mitzri part of him he got rid of. And he associated fully with Am Yisrael. But that's the process everybody had to go through. Vayachas ha-Mitzri, got to get the Mitzri out of us. And the plagues literally beat the Mitzri out of us. And because we were forced to separate from the Mitzrim. And by the way, according to a lot of Mefarshim, the first three Makos, the Jews were not exempt from. Do you know that? Although we have all these midrashim about the Jews, turning the blood into the water, granted. But for Kinim, and Abarbanel says this, there's nothing in the pasuk itself that says that the Jews didn't have. Whereas in later Makos, you find specifically the Torah telling us that in Eretz Goshen, those Makos didn't exist. The epitome of which is Makos Bechoros. So, right? So the separation was happening. Hashem used his Hashkachas Hayud. He overruled the justice system. Because what does the justice system say about the Jews? Halalu ovdei avodah zarah. That's the system. So Hashem says, okay, great. But sometimes I have to intervene to make sure that we're moving ahead towards the ultimate goal. And Klal Yisrael has a role to play, and I'm going to make sure that they play it one way or another. And that's my decision. And it's very interesting when you think about Makas Bechoros, even that wasn't so clear. What did the Jews have to do in order to avoid Makas Bechoros? What did they have to do? They had to go through a whole ordeal. They had to, first of all, they had to take the bris milah, which got rid of whatever Mitzrayim was still on their bodies, literally. And then they had to make a korban, completely sacrifice. And a korban really means that your animal self, your drives, the part of us that's Homo sapien, is all subjugated to Kedusha, to Hashem. And then they had to do something very, very strange, even beyond that. Where do they have to put the blood of that korban? On their homes, on the mezuzah and the mashkov, as if to say, the house is cleansed and purified. Our bayit is now a house of Kedusha, which is what mezuzah is really all about. People think mezuzah is some sort of amulet. I'm not saying that it's not that also, but it's not its purpose. What's the purpose of a mezuzah? To show that this house is dedicated to Hashem. It's a flag. Like you fly the flag of an embassy. People like to fly flags from their houses, especially in the south of the United States, southern United States. Everybody's got a flag. It doesn't mean anything, but it's got a flag. What are you? I say this house is embodied in what you see on this flag. This is the flag of the house. That's what mezuzah is. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, right at the door. Anything that's going to go on in that door has to go through, right, the security device of the mezuzah. Leave your shmutz outside the door, right, and you get it. Otherwise, the mezuzah is going to ring, and don't bring that in this house. Don't bring it in here. And they had to do that in order to qualify that they shouldn't be destroyed. So right till the very end, and by the way, we know in Kriyas Yamsuf too, right? That's what we just said. In Kriyas Yamsuf, they still weren't completely out of the woods. You know why? Because Klal Yisrael was pushed out of Mitzrayim. Literally, they were forced out of Mitzrayim. And it says, an interesting thing, the Or Chaim HaKadosh says, and this, that Moshe and Aaron were appointed to force Bnei Yisrael to leave Mitzrayim. And even then, how many of them did they manage to force? What percentage of Am Yisrael did they? Only 20% left. And some people say even less than that. It's a crazy, even more Jews died. So, and that happened in Makos Choshech. So there were many neshamos that weren't ready to emerge from Mitzrayim. So Hashem took the 20% that was ready, as we all know the 80-20 principle. In every company, 20% of the people do most of the work. And the other 80% of the employees are coasting. And the same thing with fundraising. It's a general principle. So he says, I'll take the 20% of Klal Yisrael for now as a deposit. Come to Har Sinai. And they only got the Torah on a condition that all the Jewish children that would be alive and born from there on in would accept the Torah so we can get the other 80%. And we are in the process right now of reclaiming the lost 80%. And that's not so simple. Really not so simple. It's interesting, some people, this is also a shot that it says, Paro was challenged Moshe, Miva mi aholchem, who do you really want to take out here? The first aliyah of the parsha. He says, what does Moshe answer? B'na'areinu uv'zkeinenu neilech, right? We're going with our elders and with our younger people, right? What's the next level?
Animals.
No, before that. B'neinu uv'noseinu, right? The boys and the girls. And finally, what? The animals, right? Okay. So what does Paro say back to him? He says, that's not what you want. Let's read the pasuk. V'yomer Moshe b'na'areinu v'zkeinenu neilech, b'banenu uv'noseinu, b'tzonenu uv'karenu, right? The sheep and then cattle, neilech. So says Paro, Yehi chen Adonai mochem, Chas v'shalom, Moshe. What are you trying to do to your people there? Kasher shalach eschem, meaning you, like yours, ve'es tapchem, and your young ones. Ru'uki ra'ad neged pnei. He doesn't even get to the animals, right? He doesn't warn Moshe, this is bad for the animals. He says, forget it, Moshe, this is bad for you. Because there was such a mazel, the star Ra'ah, who's part of the Hashgachas HaMishpat, the star Ra'ah, that's the name of the star. The evil star. By the way, good stars come. We do have that idea of good omens. The Goyim stole this from us, by the way. It's stolen. Most everything they stole. So there's this bad star. We see dam. We see death. We see destruction. So what does Hashem do to that star? He changes it into the dam of bris milah, one of the parts of the cleansing that we happen. And that's when Yeshua is going to do bris milah before they enter Eretz Yisrael. Fine. So what was this whole argument about between Moshe and Paro? There are Jewish souls on a continuum of development. There are souls that, from the top 20% to the top 2% that are called Zakanim. They already got it. They're Zezeh Shekana Chachma. They have the Chachma of Hashem. They know it. And then there are those who are Narim, they're on their way. And then there are those who are Banim and Banot. They have a further way to go. And then there are some Neshamos that haven't graduated past Sonu Bakar. They're just, they haven't made it into the human form yet. Those Neshamos are on their journey. They're getting close. If we'll eat them for cholent, they'll go a notch higher. We'll make lamb chops. We were at a wedding, there was lamb chops. Baruch Hashem. So they had a tikkun. So a certain son had a tikkun. Yeah. But Moshe says, Paro, you the Yetzer Hara, you the prosecuting attorney, I'm not leaving anybody under your jurisdiction. You work in the system of Mishpat, in the Hashgachas HaMishpat. I'm not leaving any Jewish soul behind. I'm taking them all out to the higher level of Hashgacha, and that's what's going on over here. And that starts with Parshas Bo. Because in Parshas Bo, Hashem tells Moshe, this is personal. He's saying there's a professional thing when somebody says, this is personal. It goes beyond, fair play. And therefore, pretty much, Hashem does Makas Bechoros on his own, right? And takes Klal Yisrael on his own. So, that represents the final three sfirot. The final three sfirot are the upper will of man, which is Keter Chachma Bina. Keter is our will. Where we want to go. It's that part that can appeal to go way above the Hanhagas HaMishpat. We just calling out to Hashem for just lift, to the crown. We go right to the crown and ask for what we want. It's a will, it's a desire. And then Chachma Bina is like a plan of how we're going to do it. And Chesed is doing it. And Gvura is doing it. You get into the world of action, the world of translating good values into actions. But once we get into this parsha, we're going back to the source, which is like, what I like to say is that when Klal Yisrael were in their houses, they were like in the womb. Because the door that's covered with blood is a symbol of birth, right? And he says, you're going to be born into a whole new reality. A whole new reality. That's why I need you inside. Talking to each other, healing each other, supporting each other, telling the story, telling Chachma and Das to each other. We're gestating you so you can go above into the next level. So, in summary, what did we learn today? This week's Parshas Bo, perhaps why we find that metaphor here. Moshe did give a warning to Paro, because Paro did have a chance, a remote chance, but he did have a chance. And now we entered such a realm where we're working. That chance only comes when you go above the system, right? You got to call out for beyond the rule of Mishpat. Satan says no way, and Moshe says yes. But Nareinu Iskenenu Neilech, it's all possible. It can work. And if if the system of judgment says we don't deserve it, then we should die, Hashem says Hashem has a way of flipping that around and even canceling it if he wants to, because Ein Mazel Yisrael. So does Hashem care who wins the football game? The answer is, how important is it? If it's something that fulfills God's will to move the world along to its higher purpose, quite possibly he does. Quite possibly he does. Last year I gave a little talk after last year's Super Bowl. I know ladies probably don't follow football, but a lot of people do. And the team that won was a team owned by a Jewish owner. Do you know that? And he does a lot of tzedakah here in Eretz Yisrael. And his team, he said, from the time he started doing like tzedakah and being supportive of Israel, his team never lost. And they had a game, but they were so far behind, it was impossible. And guess what? They came back and they won. It was like a miracle. I said, that shows a little bit something. If you support Hashem, you support Am Yisrael, you're a Jew that wants to do good, Hashem might tip his finger into the game and turn it around. Perhaps, quite perhaps, especially if so many million people are going to see it and find out about it. And later, that same Jew, his name is Kraft, brought a whole bunch of non-Jewish football stars, African Americans, some of them with, we don't know how great opinions they have of the Jews or the Jewish people, brought them to Israel. Do you know this? And made a football stadium here and showed them how good the Jewish people are and how wonderful the land of Israel is, So perhaps, Hashem got in and, moved the game in a certain direction. That's, I think, the answer. Hashem always wants us to move up. If we move up, Hashem will shine on us and give us the power to move up. And that's the challenge we all have. Baruch Hashem, we see Shav Chizuk in these weeks that we're going up the ladder, the spectrum. And the main thing that we have to work on in these weeks is to know that we can make real substantial changes and upgrades in our life, even though we don't think you can. You definitely can. Whether it's your emunah, whether it's your tefillah, whether it's your tzedakah, whether it's your personal goals, whatever it is, chesed, it doesn't matter what. These parshios tell the Jew, reach higher and go higher. So that's our bracha. Okay.